These are the merest fraction of the psyche-shredding mechanisms at Delirium's disposal. This is the cold, ill-perfumed zoo in which he keeps the podcasts that tear men's heads apart.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spawniverse. I am your host, Pierce Leiden. Pronouns they, them.
I'm George Marston, your co-host. Pronouns they, them, or she, her. And boy, speaking of freaks, baby, we got a real ludicrous of a character on our hands this week.
Yeah, we're recording this at the beginning of Pride Month, and it feels appropriate.
That's a little,
even though
he's
the freak himself is straight, but you never know.
Well, there's always hope for him. That's what I like to think.
I'm actually hoping that we get to cover the only one of the only queer characters in all of Spawn this month, but we might not actually. I don't know the next time that we get to see the E Hollywood reporter or E Entertainment reporter who doesn't have a name. He still doesn't have a name.
None of them do, to be fair. It's not like we know the other two.
That is true.
We just know that we know one of them always switches call signs.
Right. We'll get into that. Actually, it comes up in the letters columns in these issues. So we got two today. They have nothing to do with each other. We got the introduction of the freak, and we got the introduction of Cygor.
Kind of.
So, yeah, kind of. We'll get into that in a little bit, but
before that, Pierce, how was your weekend, my friend?
It was pretty good, actually. I went on a long bike ride. And then my girlfriend and I play Magic the Gathering, so we invited a friend of ours out. We biked for like 30 miles. We were out for a few hours, and then and then we met up with another friend of ours who's like getting back into Magic after years away. And we have a bunch of pre-made decks, and he was like, "Oh, I want to play." So we played some Commander, and we closed out the bar last night.
Wow!
Like we started at 4 p.m. and then at 1 a.m. they were like, "You need to leave."
Get you a relationship that can do both, people.
It's true.
It's
true. I'm very thankful.
Covered.
We played, and it was funny because we played one game, and it took 3 hours because Commander games take a long time. And then we were like, "Oh, but like, Dan, you probably have to go." And he's like, "No, like, let's play another one." And then we ended up playing 2 more full games.
That's how it goes. I used to play.
I got killed both times first.
Wow.
But it was still very fun.
I used to play Legend of the Five Rings, which was a similar kind of like collectible card game, but a little more complex in like its strategy and stuff because you had like different regions and maybe not less complex, but a little slower of a game to begin with than Magic in general. And I used to play with this friend of ours who would take forever to make any move. He'd look at his hand, he'd look at your hand, and then he'd put his hand on his cards, and then he'd go, and pick up his hand. Anyway, I had a pretty good weekend. I saw the movie In a Violent Nature last night.
How was it?
It was pretty good. It's like a slasher movie from the perspective of the slasher.
Right.
Like if it followed Jason the whole time. So there's a lot of these long, creepy, lingering shots of like a lumbering revenant dragging a headless body through the woods and stuff like that. But it was pretty interesting. It was fun to watch. I also picked up some new Marvel Legends. I got a pretty sick Sam Wilson Captain America figure from Target exclusive.
Ooh.
I had to actually show up in a store. And then I got classic style Scarlet Witch and a really good old fashioned, very comics accurate MODOK that's about the size of a softball.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, got a lot of MODOK.
I like all the freak characters, which is appropriate for this episode. But like
the freaks.
my brother is a big fan of Beak.
Oh, okay.
And only because when he was a Marvel intern, I forget what his interaction with Beak even was. I think he had to do like a character profile or something for the website that he had to do. His other job was when all the Marvel shows were on Netflix, he was the one in charge of picking the screenshot that was used for the preview of the episode. So he'd use whatever looked really funny or stupid.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that was one of the jobs they gave to an intern.
Wow. Well, one of life's little pleasures for him, I'm sure, at the time.
Yeah, but now anytime the X-Men come up, he's just like, what's Barnell Bohusk up to? I'm like, bro, do you really want to know?
He's the leader. He's the leader of the team. Still is.
Barnell Bohusk could be in a Spawn comic. He feels like he could be a Spawn character. That's maybe
he could be a Spawn.
Yeah, he could be. Listen, the Crow movie's coming out this summer. The Crow is a Spawn.
The Crow is a Spawn.
Or Spawn's a Crow.
Spawn is a Crow.
They should both. The fact that is a team up that hasn't happened yet. I think we've already talked about this before.
Spawn, the Crow. Honestly, hire us. We'll do it.
That seems like printing tens of dollars.
Tens. You would have dozens of people.
The other thing about my weekend, it was a bit of a sad weekend, George.
Yeah, that's true. There was some sad news.
Yeah, some very sad news for listeners who are, film aficionados who know about Alamo Drafthouse, or just Stephen King fans. Probably what he's most known for at this point. Mr. Scott Wampler passed this weekend. We found out that he passed, which we did not know him. But he was somebody whose writing I really, really enjoyed. His interview with Ryan Johnson is an all-timer, and I recommend looking it up. He basically says, hey, Ryan Johnson, he was interviewing him about Knives Out. And he says, hey, I just interviewed Rob Zombie, but I ran out of time. I didn't get to ask him this question, so I'm going to ask you. So in your 1998 hit single, Dragula, is the car a vampire or is a car for vampires? And Ryan Johnson is like, I was told there would be no Star Wars question.
Classic.
And then he's like, oh, cool. So you're like not answering the question. And Ryan Johnson's like, listen, I just like make the art and I put it out there. And it's up to people to interpret any way that they want. It's such an all-timer of an interview question because it's completely out of left field. And like, that's just the kind of vibe that Scott brought to kind of everything he did. And I have friends down in Austin that would definitely see him at, showings and stuff, that he was just a force. And KingCast is an incredible podcast. If you are a Stephen King fan, you kind of have to listen to it. It's great radio. They have incredible guests. I mean, Elijah Wood talking about Misery. Cool. They get to talk to King himself. Cool. There's just lots of horror directors and stuff, and the outpouring of support and like really kind things that people said this weekend was really cool. So by the time this comes out, we'll be months past that, but that is what happened this weekend, to timestamp this episode a little bit. So rest in peace, Scott. And also listen to Jesus Wept, his Hellraiser podcast. And there's still some episodes of KingCast that have not come out, or that have his voice on it and his mark on them. And we were in talks to have him on this show. So I'm a little bummed. This show kind of only exists because of him. He was the one that was, when I was first reading through Spawn again, he was like, yeah, keep going. And then when I reached out about him showing up on an episode, he was all for it, And so anyway, little downer there. Sorry, everybody, but want to pay respect to somebody in the genre film sort of journalism industry.
Absolutely.
That was a singular force. And
he loomed large as an entertainment writer myself, and of a sort who worked alongside film writers. I knew of him that way, and his presence was huge. And our hearts just go out to his friends and family, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
on that note, we have 2 episodes of Spawn to talk about, or 2 issues of Spawn to talk about. I think we got to get right into it.
Yeah, let's do it. So our first issue is paying off. Is issue number 37, and I was about to start right on talking about it as I often do. Here's who
I'm gonna
created
hit you
this
with
comic.
the credits.
That's right.
Yeah.
Blast me with them.
Spawn number 37, Image Comics presents The Freak. I feel like Spawn and the Freak. I feel like a
Gator and the Gooch, Drive Time Radio Shock Jock. Listeners, if you want to hear us as Spawn and the Freak on
Spawn and the thing is, you do both the voices though, so it's just you talking to yourself.
You're the producer who's just hitting like boink, doink, doink.
That
the
is
sound
kind of
effects. That is what you do.
It is what I do.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
So this is written by Alan Moore, plotted by Todd McFarlane, penciled by Greg Capullo, inks by Todd McFarlane, letters by Tom Warzakowski, colors by Steve Oliff, Quinn Suplee, and Oleoptics. Special thanks to Kevin Conrad, Julia Simmons, Chance Wolfe. Dedicated to Keith Giffen, one of the all-time greats. JLI being, I think, one of the big things. But
one of the first comics I ever read and loved, JLI. My dad, when I was about 4 years old, maybe 5, I'd had comics all my life, up until that point, even when I was a tiny kid, as soon as I could hold things. I learned to read from the little comics that came with toys. But one of the first times my dad took me to a comic store was one of the Newberry Comics branches in Massachusetts. And one of the first things I picked was one of those I think it was JLI number 8, where the Manhunter is about to throw, I think it's Batman into the fire. Anyway, Keith Giffen, R.I.P. to another legend.
Yeah, truly. One interesting thing is that this issue has a summary of the previous issue, a thing that we've not gotten, a previously on Spawn.
I think we might have had one once.
Like one time, but it's rare that it doesn't
not
happen
a thing
just
yet.
It's rare that it doesn't just happen as the first page of the comic with like a splash of Spawn.
A lot of that's been happening in the script in a lot of these issues.
Right.
So.
This is previously on Spawn. Spawn attempts to kill Wynn, but Terry intervenes. Wynn relieves Terry of his duties and orders Spawn's termination after framing him for murdering a guard. Spawn escapes to another building. Helicopters bomb the building, believing Spawn has been killed. Meanwhile, Sam and Twitch learn Banks has been cleared on the Kincaid case and speculate a connection to the CIA fiasco. Banks vows to dispose of them, but Sam and Twitch dismiss his threats. Wynn's superiors visit him in hospital, concerned about the media attention on the CIA. Clown consoles Wynn by promising to make Spawn's activities look like a terrorist attack. Spawn visits Wanda to warn her that Terry works for the enemy. Spawn, scaring Wanda, leaves realizing Wanda still doesn't know who he is.
Wow, usually that takes about 2 hours.
Yeah. Also, this is not a summary of this is not a good summary of the last issue.
This is the plot that Todd wrote out.
Yeah. Spawn escapes to another building is the most hilarious part.
Somehow Spawn returned.
Yeah. Yeah, the Freak. Here we go.
The Freak, yes. It opens up with the Freak finding his way into Spawn's alley, or at least making his way towards Spawn's alley, just at the same time as a gang of weirdos called the, what are they called?
The Supremes.
Supremes.
Okay.
They all kind of look like Chapel, weirdly enough.
I want to backtrack us real quick to the cover.
Okay, of course.
The cover is an homage almost to Todd himself. Because it's the Freak with a big blade in front of his face with a reflection of Spawn in it. So it's kind of that Hulk cover with Wolverine.
Oh, yeah, I love that cover.
It's a great cover.
I have that issue somewhere. That's a great comic.
It's a great cover that has been homaged now as the Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, that's
poster.
True. That's true.
So
and it's been homaged so many times in comics.
But it's funny to see it here and to have just Greg Capullo do it. It doesn't say after Todd on the cover though. It just Todd inked it, and he's like, I don't know, whatever, you're just doing your thing. The Freak also weirdly does look like Alan Moore.
He kind of does.
If he didn't have
shaved.
a beard.
Yeah. Well, that's what I look like exactly now. Is Alan Moore if he shaved? Alan Moore face, Grant Morrison gender.
But yeah, so the Freak's hanging out in this alleyway. I guess is he wearing flip flops or just no shoes? I think
he might be barefoot.
Shoes.
All he's wearing is his jeans, he's wearing just shredded bell bottoms. When I was a teenager, I was wearing shredded Jinkos. Jinkos so long they would scrape the ground, so long that you couldn't see you were wearing rollerblades underneath them.
with a Super Nintendo in your back pocket.
Exactly,
Whole
literally.
Super Nintendo.
Exactly. Man, they should bring back Jinkos cheaper.
They kind of did.
They're still there, but they're like $300 a pair, which, it's just
the price you pay for quality.
Yeah, it is. Apparently, there could be anything under those pants. That's all I'm saying. They're incredible.
What I want to know is why is there just another? So we've got the nerds.
Mm-hmm.
We got the creeps.
Mm-hmm.
We now have the Supremes.
Are we gonna get the Shondells? Are we gonna get the are the Ronettes next?
I really do hope that one of them is a singing group.
Yeah. Oh,
Like I
the
want like
barbershop choir boys.
Yeah, like 50s greaser barbershop quartet.
Is there a Warriors world, like a version of Spawn where all the like weird one word gangs are all?
Well, that's the thing.
That would be awesome.
That is kind of what they're doing, right? They're kind of trying to be like, yeah, it's New York and the Warriors was a cool thing. But we talked about this before. The Warriors, like the baseball Furies, like have a thing.
Yeah, they're like iconic,
The Supremes are just guys with swords.
Yeah, well, they have big knives like Chapel, and they have skull faces like Chapel, and that's what's interesting about it.
That is not ever like mentioned though by any of the characters.
It's not.
Like even Spawn isn't like
to be how they
kind of look like Chapels.
No, it's not. But we open on Freak basically soliloquizing in the alley about how he is the freak. The freak shall reign supreme in the mildew sequined empire of the outcast and the lost. And then while he's like kind of doing this weird freak monologue, he's also thinking to himself, eat dinner, watch TV, and maybe later go out for a beer. So it's this weird, like, him shooting out these weird lines of like strange Alan Moore poetic dialogue, and then also internally just thinking very sort of normal and mundane thoughts. And as he's shouting about himself, that's when the Supremes show up.
And the Supremes, despite the way they look, they're a pretty conservative gang, and they don't like anything abnormal around here.
This is a conservative territory ruled by a bunch of muscular, half-naked men with giant sharp knives and skulls painted on our faces. That's the other thing, is that they say, like, what is it, Halloween? When they have the, like, apostrophe in there, like, British English style.
So weird.
Alan Moore. It looks like Halloween came early. You're dressed as skeletons. You're dressed as skeleton warriors, dude. I definitely dressed exactly like this for Halloween at least once.
And I mean, the thing that's funny about this whole intro is that the art keeps making a point to be like, Spawn's just over here wearing a fedora.
Yeah, he's like hunched up, wrapped up in his cape with his fedora on. I mean, who among us? So I have fallen asleep in an alley just like that. I do love the drawings of the freak we have on both the pages here, like the second and third page where he's like saying his name and he's in that big kind of weird pose. You could almost see just that sticker of the freak as almost like a keep on trucking kind of thing. Like, it's such a nice like first intro to him.
Yeah. No, I think the freak is cool. I like his weird medallion. This
weird shadowy face here on the next page. Oh yeah, he is wearing a medallion with his shredded bell bottoms.
Is he also drooling?
I think he is always drooling. Like, he's just a drooling freak.
What's
baby.
going on with all the characters in Spawn drooling a lot?
It just adds a nasty texture to stuff, doesn't it?
That's true.
Like, I do really like this top panel of him all bathed in shadow, like the way the Todd McFarlane's inks kind of let just little bits of his face breathe with highlights. It's cool.
Yeah, it's great.
And then the double page spread of Spawn creeping up and like flapping his cape open at the Supremes.
A lot of really good perspective work here too. Capullo knows Todd loves to frame stuff with a body in the foreground, so let me do it too. So we get the freak's weird body in the foreground, framing everything that's kind of happening. Super cool. We're going to talk about this across these two issues. We get two very weird versions of Spawn here.
Yeah.
We've gotten sort of Spawn who is apathetic. We've gotten Spawn who is sort of grieving. Here we get Spawn who's like super gullible and like doesn't ask any questions, even though that's usually all he does.
Yeah.
And then in the next issue, we're gonna get Spawn who's just like on the warpath to nothing.
I think part of it is they contrast that in the next issue where he says, I met someone who taught me how to deal with my masters, which he's talking about the freak killing this guy. So the freak is definitely playing into a certain part of Spawn's nature where Spawn is very vulnerable to the idea that like someone twisted him into a weapon of evil. He even says to him, I was a government assassin. You know, like he's basically telling Spawn's own origin to him. I think if Todd McFarlane had written this, I don't think the first issue would be quite as good because Freak's prose wouldn't be as interesting. It would be probably more like wacka wacka, like just saying crazy punchlines and stuff. Yeah, exactly. But I think that slight disconnect makes the theme that's shared between them a little more oblique. Spawn scares off the Supremes. They say they don't like anything abnormal around here. Spawn springs up with his cape blazing open and says, "Oh, abnormals I can handle. It's the subhumans that really piss me off." And he scares the hell out of them, runs them off. This last little panel on the page of his giant flappy cape is cool.
Yeah, I dig it.
Capullo's really coming. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I really like this double page spread. It's just cool.
It is a great double page spread. Yeah, Capullo is really kind of coming into his own with his version of Spawn's cape. You know, it's just one of those little telltales for an artist, like how they draw Ben Grimm's head or something. Like,
I also like that the cape is sort of back to its former glory.
It's growing back. It's still like a little more spindly and like bat-like itself than it used to be. It used to be just a big, flowing, billowing cape. Now it's a little more scary and like Halloween decoration-y. But yeah, I'm loving the way that Capullo is kind of growing into drawing the character. And I really love Spawn's face here as he confronts the freak. And the freak is like basically not running away and telling Spawn, I've met scarier things than you. I'm a freak of nature and I'm proud to be called one.
I like the little mats that are watching.
Yeah.
As they're shaking hands.
There's always some little weird foreground detail. The coloring there could be a little more interesting. Maybe like the background of the panel of the whole page that's like this kind of weird Kelly green.
It is strange.
Maybe a little different color. But throughout these issues, I actually kind of like the coloring quite a bit. It's a little more toned down than some of those like really hot, saturated mid-90s computer colors we've seen in Spawn.
Do you think that some of it has to do with the fact that the freak's hair is like this like gray and it is so big and wild that it ends up taking up a large portion of the page? And so it creates a different kind of balance.
It does, and it's almost also kind of echoing Spawn's cape, the same way that Freak kind of echoes Spawn's story to him. And the thing is, we've seen the Freak in the shadows lurking before.
Right.
And so...
we saw him back in issue 33, helps out Violator.
Right. And so we know that he's at least got some idea of what Spawn and his world are and what their place in the universe is. So it's kind of the impression I get is that he's maybe studied up on Spawn a little bit and learned some of the things that other people have said.
What are you, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones?
That's exactly right. God, dude, do you know how bad I felt when I learned? First off, that fucking song and like album they did about George Floyd was just...
I didn't even know that was a thing.
They did a whole thing, and it was like Georgie Boy or some shit like that, which... Well, listen, bad case of when keeping it real goes wrong. Quote, another case of when keeping it real goes wrong.
They never learned to knock on wood, so.
They didn't, and so
they knew someone who had.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so the worst happened, and now also fucking Dickie Barrett from the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones is like a fucking anti-vaxxer, fucking Kennedy guy, like what's his name? RFK,
yeah.
Robert Kennedy Jr., who's married to Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm. She could be the
Wait, what?
Yeah. Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm could be the first lady of the United States if Robert Kennedy Jr.'s campaign comes to fruition.
We live in the worst reality.
Isn't it weird? Isn't it so weird?
I have nothing to say to that.
I don't even know what to. There's nothing to say. It's so bizarre. It's if someone jumped forward from 2003, they'd be like, "Guys, you're joking because you know I watch a lot of VH1."
Yeah.
Like,
boy. Anyway, one of the things I really like about Capullo drawing Freak is that similar to the way he draws, the cape is always like billowing and doing weird stuff. The Freak is just doing weird stuff with his body at all times.
oh, he's just posing like a cat. He's like really stretching and slinking about and like just lurking and slurping.
He's got 18 abs. Half of them are maybe ribs.
Yeah, he has like a Jim Morrison-esque quality. The impression I get, again, to quote once again,
one of the greatest bands of our time.
I love the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones to a point.
Up until 2020.
About the circa 2020. That's about the point, exactly. I saw them live once. It was incredible. He was taking off his suit and throwing. It was at Warped Tour. He was taking off his suit and throwing all the pieces into the crowd. And he threw his tie at this girl, and she caught it. And this guy in a white singlet, like, grabbed it. And he goes, hey, give that fucking back. And he goes, what are you going to wear? You going to beat your wife wearing a tie? Because he was wearing the, like, wife beater singlet. It was funny, and he took the wind out of the dickhead sails. And now he hath becometh thy dickhead.
That's how it happens.
It is. You live long enough, something, etc.
Be a villain, right? That's what it is.
That's what it says. That's right. If you live long enough, be a villain.
Be a villain.
Yeah, you get to be a villain. That's kind of true. If you get old enough, you get to do almost anything.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
To that point, I was just watching a thing about a guy that in Azusa County.
Watching a thing about a guy.
It was like Internet Today about for the last 10 years in Azusa County, somebody's been shooting BBs like through people's windows. And they're like, people will be like, yeah, my fucking window's broken today, like on cars or houses or whatever.
Menace.
For 10 years. And so everybody's like, oh, this is some like Dennis the Menace ass shit.
Some long-running criminal mastermind.
Some fucking teenagers. But if it was teenagers, you'd think like 10 years, like when are they starting this that they're still doing it?
They're no longer teenagers.
No, they caught the guy that did it. He's 81 years old.
Legend.
They caught him. He died the next day.
Legend. Went out undefeated. Wow. Not condoning, not saying that you should do vandalism like that. If someone punched a hole in my window of my car, I'd be really upset.
But if somebody's... Wait. Also, he's doing it with a slingshot.
It was an 81-year-old. That's the original Dennis the Menace, y'all.
Yep.
He was still out there. That's the original Dennis the Menace was a real kid. Did you know that? The dude who created Dennis the Menace named him after his own son and then basically disowned his son. So Dennis the Menace is a real kid who, like, basically his dad ignored him in favor of the cartoon version of himself and never got a red cent out of it.
Did you read The Unwritten? Have we talked about this?
No, I haven't, but I'm familiar with Peter
Gross? Milligan? No.
Peter Milligan.
Is it Peter Milligan?
Wrote it, I think, yeah.
I think you're right. Anyway, that book is about a guy whose dad writes basically Harry Potter, but the main character's name is Tommy Taylor.
Wow.
Which I think is the same name as the kid from Books of Magic.
It's certainly the same. No. Books of Magic is...
no, that's...
Tim Hunter.
Yeah, right. That's Timmy Hunter, right?
But Tom Taylor did write a bunch of comics for DC.
Yeah. So Tommy Taylor is like, basically it's like Tommy Taylor and the blah, 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 blah. Just like Harry Potter, same thing. And so when we meet Tommy Taylor, he is now an adult. His dad has disappeared. He's presumed dead. And he goes to comic book conventions and book conventions to sign things because he's the real life Tommy Taylor. And his dad used to teach him about like authors and their great works.
Wow.
Because they're all real. And everything that was in the books is like kind of real.
Wow.
So it's kind of a Dennis the Menace situation.
Wow.
That's now what I'm going to call that.
That's a Dennis. That's a Dennis the Menace.
So I think that Dennis, the real Dennis of the Menace fame,
was the friends we made along the way.
Was being trained by his father. That's why he had to keep some distance. And he just didn't know it.
That dude never wound up going to conventions. I think he's still alive, and he has a lot of trauma. Anyway,
wow.
I think he wants to get away from being the Dennis the Menace kid. Because also then people think you're fucking Bart Simpson. Anyway, R.I.P. to another legend in this episode, another king. Not the Dennis the Menace creator. I can't remember.
You mean the 81-year-old who was shooting BBs?
That guy, yes. So the freak is posing around and he's talking about, you want to hear my origin story? You want to know how I got these bell bottoms?
I like the double page spread of his origin story. You do have to read it in a weird way because you got to go clockwise around the page.
You got to go clockwise all the way around back to the bottom of the first page.
But that's cool.
It's interesting, and the art in it is cool. Basically, while he's telling his origin, he's thinking cartoon wallpaper in the boys' room, ding-dongs, Oprah. Again, normal suburban life. But he's telling his origin that he was a government operative. He worked in undercover operations for the government. He had a lovely wife and kid. All that got blown apart one summer night when his family was murdered. And so it turns out the person who did it was this guy, Dr. Delirium, who is basically conducting a secret MK Ultra experiment where he's using these machines to brainwash people into being his mindless slaves. Now, it looks like sorry, my brain went kaput for a second. He's brainwashing people into being his mindless slaves, and he is taken prisoner, put in these machines that warp his mind. But instead of turning him into a mindless slave, they turn him into a free-minded, freewheeling freak. And that's the sort of like MK Ultra, like guy doing mind experiments, accidentally created Charles Manson, kind of actually what really happened kind of thing.
I guess that's also what he looks like, right? He's supposed to kind of look like Charles Manson. We didn't really bring that up at the top. Like, he doesn't have a beard, but
he's got that like dirty hippie who's been a hippie for the last 20 years. And never changed his bell bottoms thing.
I really like the design of this page because I like the sort of, he's got this like fractured psyche, fractured memory sort of thing. So the panels all look kind of like shattered glass. The background is him yelling and it's his hair and it's, I don't know, it's cool.
Yeah.
I actually even like that his hair sort of interacts with the shards of the memory.
Right.
Like they kind of overlap. It's really cool. The thing that this is like the proto version of for Capullo is in his run of Batman.
Right.
There's that Court of the Owls issue where you have to turn it a lot.
That's right. The Labyrinth issue.
Yeah.
Well, and then you get the last panel is him fully formed as Freak posing on a rooftop with his claw-like fingers, with his hair spread out against the moon. It kind of snaps into place that he is really telling Spawn a version of his own story. He is a government assassin who lost his family and was turned into a servant of a malevolent master, but he broke free and now he wants revenge against his master.
At this point, though, we don't have any reason to believe that he would know anything about Spawn, really.
Well, aside from the fact that we know he's been lurking in the background.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying that. I said that earlier. I think we're maybe to believe that he's picked up on some stuff while he's been like lurking and watching Spawn. He talks a lot about how like the maggot piss-filled alleys are their home and they're one of a kind and blah, blah, blah. It sounds like if Shakespeare wrote Travis Bickle in a way.
I think it's also, though, that if Al just explained what's going on, it sounds crazy.
Right.
You know? Like if he said, like if he in his current form said, I used to be a world famous government assassin and then somebody killed me. And then like,
right.
If it was explained, it would sound nuts. He's he's not reacting that way because to him he's like, oh cool, there's like somebody else I can vibe with, so that's
and even
cool.
if it's just coincidence, it's working on Spawn. He found the right angle.
Right.
Yeah, he says the purgatory of cigar butts and dead dogs. So he says they're going to fight through the fortress of delirium and get revenge on the man who took Freak's wife and kids from him.
Right. Spawn, this is where I was saying, like, Spawn just sort of along for the ride here. He's like, I guess I'll help you. That seems like a totally good idea. You seem like super chill and normal and like gotta help you. So
yeah. And Freak is living in the sewer. He's got this like whole house in the sewer. Says it's unbelievable. You built a mansion in the sewers.
But also everything's like broken and bad, and also he lives in a sewer still, Spawn. Like I understand that might be an upgrade from your alley where you have one
very Morlocks, Ninja Turtles.
You have one chair.
Yeah.
That you don't even sleep in it. You just sit to brood. That's your brooding chair, and then you sleep in trash. So I guess this is an upgrade for Spawn. It is Ninja Turtle-y. It is, Morlocksy. I get it.
Yeah. Well, and then so he leads Spawn through the sewers to the place where he says they're going to break through the roof, through the floor of the layer of Dr. Dementis?
Delirium.
No,
Dementis
Dr.
is from
Delirium.
the new Mad Max movie.
Which was great.
Fucking ruled.
Yeah, it was really good. Dr. Delirium. And so...
That's honestly, George Miller should direct a fucking Spawn movie.
We should be so lucky.
That would fucking
Everyone should be so lucky. That would be so cool. And throughout the whole thing, even as he's still like raving about the exquisite tortures of Dr. Delirium, he's thinking to himself, coffee percolating in the kitchen. Later on, a little Springsteen, little Meatloaf. Fridays we go bowling.
I like just that as like a sort of, it sort of reminds me of Fight Club in a way, right? As the sort of the tedium of everyday life, the sort of boredom of everything.
Well, here we're getting the impression that it's what was quote unquote taken from him.
Right.
Was this normal life. And he leads Spawn to the spot. I like the sewers. I like this weird, creepy, broken baby doll up in the front of the top panel as he's leading him through the sewers. It is.
That's the kind of stuff that I'm always really excited to see because I'm like, so you had to spend a few minutes actually drawing that, Greg, huh?
That's what he chose to be like, I want to have this to be the focus of this.
Yeah.
And it's cool. And I mean, you see like Spawn and Freak ahead in the distance, and it's like a less rendered version of them. It looks great still, but it is interesting the choices an artist makes laid out like that. And like in terms of how they interpret that storytelling. So Spawn, like, what's up there? And he says, there's all kinds of things. There's microwave beams that'll poach your brains. There's mind control techniques that have you doubting who you are. And so they get up there, and there's all these huge machines in this.
Extremely unclear what they could be for. They're sort of nondescript machines, which is fine. That's sort of the point of them.
In retrospect, once we get through the next few pages of kind of what the twist of this is, it kind of makes sense what they might be supposed to be. Like, it seems like they might be supposed to be electroshock therapy machines. Yeah. But they look like the kind of machines that the Angels use to create the fucking anti-Spawn.
Oh, that's true.
They look like huge sci-fi massive machines, So, like, if I walked in and saw those and I was Spawn, I'd be like, wow. This guy really did get put through the ringer of all these weird contraptions.
I think a weakness of this era of comics is there's a certain sort of anonymity to the technology, the way technology looks. It all kind of looks the same. Everything looks like fucking overt kill. And so like,
yeah,
that's what I mean by these just kind of look like nothing machines.
You can't discern exactly what the great machine designer.
The great machine designer is Jack Kirby.
True, of course.
And 90s machine work just looks.
I mean, I like the way they look. I personally, my art when I draw machine stuff, which I like to do, little greebly sci-fi weird things with tubes, like it looks a lot like this. I think it's part of the point that we don't know what it's for, because Spawn
True.
isn't supposed to know what it's for. If we walked in and it was obviously the basement of a hospital, which is what this turns out to be as we get into it, Spawn would probably be like, wait a minute, I think this freak might be a freak.
I think though that
I think there's something wrong with this freak.
I think there's something like just so nondescript about it though, that it just doesn't look. It's like even like when you look at like a character like Cable in the 90s, where you're just like, oh right, like cyborg stuff just like kind of looks like this. It's got this like gloss to it that it's not very textured. It's not very like, you can say this about a lot of look at the Image comics of the 90s, right? There's a bunch of fucking half cyborg fucking guys, right? Cyberforce looks like this in a way.
Well, and half of Spawn's enemies, as we'll find out even in the next issue,
right? And
are
so
all just weird cyborg guys. Cyborgs were really cool. RoboCop was hugely influential, I think. And I like cyborgs too.
RoboCop though looks designed. This is kind of my point, is like technology things, like when I think about like technology stuff that like I'm gonna throw like credit to Jack Kirby for, something like Machine Man or Mac, like there's something to them that feels more
true. But to be fair to the art here, also Jack Kirby, a lot of the time when he drew a machine, it was just a big bunch of weird cables and like shapes and shit and like lights. It was just a big giant mass of stuff. A lot more of the time, though, it was being defined on the page as something, and so he was really good at capturing the vibe of what a thing was supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like if it's supposed to be the fucking like transmogrifier, he's really good at making something look like a transmogrifier.
If it just, I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like it felt better.
Sure, and I mean this is just a one-off. This is one page here where we even see it.
I'm really like the laying into Greg Capullo here. I'm so sorry.
Well, I think it's well drawn. I think the point is that it is nondescript. I think that's part of the point of it.
That's fair.
But the next page, I love this page of Spawn tackling the what are they called? Not interns.
Orderlies.
Orderlies. Thank you. Tackling the orderlies, and Freak is saying, "Watch out for their needles of nothingness," which
fun.
Sedation. But this picture of Spawn jumping on them is great. His one big boot looks cool.
You are right that having Alan Moore do the script helps, because again, Todd's getting better, but we're not getting, let's show them how real warriors of the abyss can revel in the maw of slaughter. We're not getting that from Todd.
Exactly. No. Well, the thing is, we've talked about before multiple times that you are reading from the single issues.
Yeah.
In most cases.
Yeah.
And I, in most cases, am reading from the compendium. And it's been a good way to get kind of the perspective of how it's collected for the listeners, probably how they're most likely to read it, or one of the most accessible ways for them to read it, and in one of the ways if they want to collect it. But because of that, all the credits for this compendium are way up at the very front. And when I first started reading this, and he's all talking about like the fucking like gripping maw of madness and hell's exquisite tortures and all this shit, I was like, did Todd write this? And I had to go flip back and see that it was Alan Moore, and I was just like, hey. But fair play to Todd McFarlane that I was even for a moment like, people would have believed that he had if it said so.
I mean, we're seeing him start to synthesize his influences, right? So
yeah,
and get a lot better at it. And he is one of those guys who he's like, if you let me do it 100 times, I will be much better at it by the 100th time than I was the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is what we like about him.
Oh. Well, he comes from the background of sports. And when you're practicing sports, that's what you have to do. Unless you are like an absolute intuitive athlete that can really do something perfectly the first time, those people have existed. The way to get good at like hitting a baseball is swinging a bat hundreds of times at a baseball.
Exactly, which is probably what a lot of our listeners want to do, is get really good at baseball.
That's what I want to do. When I was a little kid, I thought I could, but then I got really sick at baseball camp and I had to miss the whole week.
Sounds like the title of an emo album. Got
It
really
does.
sick at baseball camp
Baseball
and missed
camp
the
and
whole
had
week.
whole week. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so they fight the orderlies. They're heading after Dr. Delirium. That's who they're after, which is fun. You know, Spawn's doing stuff. Spawn literally says, "You've got me along for the ride." So he's just
tearing through orderlies. He's beating the shit out of them. And then like this next panel of Spawn like snarling and busting through this door. Like the freak is like, behind these doors, the dukes of delusion and damnation, blah, blah. And he's like, if you have doubts within your soul, turn back. And he's like, not me, friend. And just bust the fuck down through the door.
Yeah, rules.
All these pages of Spawn are great. The next page of Spawn, hunched over, is really cool. Freak busts in, finds the doctor, and the doctor's like, what are you doing? You're insane. And the freak's like, precisely. And he takes the candelabra he's been carrying and drips the wax all over the doctor's face. And the doctor grabs a gun. And in the struggle, he grabs a gun, and the freak is like, a gun? I'd have thought a kingpin like you would be too superior for such triviality. And he launches him through the window.
Dinner at 6. Strata council meeting at 7:30.
Yeah, and that's what he's thinking the whole time. Doctor's appointment at 3, put roast on at 4. And now it's starting to be a little stranger to see that as his internal monologue. And there'll be one final twist on that from Freak himself that we'll question in the end here. As they're struggling out the window, the doctor shoots Freak, and it just grazes off of his face.
I like great radio there.
It looks like a certain version of a European last name.
Yeah.
But once again, Tom Morzakowski killing it. Freak's lettering is really cool. We haven't talked about that yet. His lettering is all off kilter.
Oh yeah.
But in a way that gives you a sense of voice. I mean, obviously, I've been doing a freak voice. Give me that freak voice.
Standard freak voice.
Standard freak voice. Run-of-the-mill freak voice. It's a run-of-the-mill freak voice. So the police are starting to show up. Spawn's like, Freak, hurry up. Spawn's Freak is like, these cops are all under Dr. Delirium's control. When they show up, we're going to have to fight our way through them. Freak throws Dr. Delirium out the window as he's begging for his life. Dr. Delirium is like, please, I'll do whatever you want. And Freak says, too late. I need my family. Too bad you killed them. And then he lets him go, and he falls, presumably to his death, on top of a cop car.
There is the moment where Spawn is like, wait, he killed your parents? I thought he killed your family, like your wife and kid.
He says, he killed your parents?
Yeah, he does call him out on that, and Freak is like, he said he killed my family. He killed my parents, too. And that's when you start to go, I think that's the part of this as a reader that I'm like, well, that's kind of fun that you're having Spawn call that out. I wish Spawn asked like a couple more questions a little bit earlier.
One more question, like, what's one more fact about you, the Freak? But that's what I'm saying. He's like totally snowed by the Freak's story. And that's why he's just immediately like, oh, you have the worst life in the world, and so do I. I'll help you. Yeah, Dr. Delirium is dead, and Spawn is helping the Freak fight their way down this whole stairway of cops. And Freak is like blowing holes in the cops.
Oh, yeah.
He's blasting these skulls out of these guys. Literally just killing a bunch of cops. And telling Spawn that the cops are, you know what? If a bunch of cops had their Minecraft saves deleted. So they fight their way through the cops. Spawn's kind of just there as the Freak is basically blasting his way through. And they make their way down into the sewers.
I like the panel of the cape pulling the sewer cover down.
Yeah, I like that
Very
too.
Cool. Very cool.
Very
I like
cool.
that a lot.
Meanwhile, at the Federal Health Services Department.
Another thing that's not really in New York is probably in DC.
Right. Well, I mean, there might be an office of Federal Health and Services there. I don't know.
Feels like most federal stuff is not here, and it is.
What do you think would happen in New York today, Pierce, if the CIA headquarters was in New York, and the building next to it got blown up by headquarters after the CIA building was shot up.
I don't know, because like historically, like nothing bad happens to buildings here, so I wouldn't know.
That's true. Good point. Good point. Very little evidence to go on of what the police in New York are like when they're given a lot of free reign to act in the city.
Correct. Yeah. They've never done anything wrong.
I'll tell you this, the makers of Candy Crush would have their profits going way, way up. So at the Federal Health Services Department, we meet Mrs. Kublitsky. Or Kulbitsky. Kulbitsky?
Kulbitsky. I think that's what we landed on.
Kulbitsky.
Yeah.
It's for the listener, it's Kulbiczi. Kulbitsky.
And neither of us are Eastern European enough to
Polish,
know how to say that.
No, I'm sorry. And
listen, I call the Kosciuszko Bridge the Kosciuszko. I called it that for a long time. So
anyway, our mispronunciations and inability to discover the right ones aside, we meet Mrs. Kulbitsky. Mrs. Kulbitsky. We meet Mrs. Kulbitsky, whose husband has been remanded to psychiatric care for some time. And
it's
they're worried.
It's not Rhys Ifans.
No.
Even though it does look like him.
The department here is worried because his doctor, Dr. DeLorean, hasn't been answering the phone. Meanwhile, Mrs. Kulbitsky is saying that she left him years ago when she didn't want to have kids. And she says he can rot in the street for all I care. I'm sick of being dragged into his freaky dream world. So here's where we kind of discover that the freak is pretty much a guy whose name is Kulbitsky. Wow, that is hard. It's the LB instead of B. It's probably why so many people want to pronounce my last name Martson instead of Marston. And I've always been like, that's not hard.
My last name.
Now I can't say Kulbitsky.
My last name turns into Linden all the time.
Yeah.
So
people's, your brain fills in the gaps.
People gonna people.
People gonna people. People.
The best line in this last page when Spawn's like, yo, like, what the hell did we just do?
Yeah.
And he goes, you want answers? Fine. Here's the whole scoop. The whole insane gig, it's just a shtick along with this wig and makeup. Just serves some purpose, like your getup. Sounds kind of crazy, but it's all I've got. That murderer delirium. He wiped out my family. Do you understand what that means? I like this as like he's still so crazy that even though he thinks his crazy shtick is a shtick.
It's very jokery in a way. The whole thing is very jokery.
Which Joker? There are three.
All of them, actually, when you stack them on top of each other, they become one freak. Perfect Joker. Yeah, one freak. I saw someone do some fan art. I wish I could say the name. Someone drew a version of the three Jokers as like Three Stooges, kind of, and it was really yeah. Nice guy, eh? So Spawn, yeah, he's very confused. Freak is like, I'm not actually insane. We just killed my supervillain doctor is all. And we now know that the thing is he actually is, unwell, and he is in treatment that he has escaped from. And that wasn't Dr. Delirium, that was Dr. DeLorean. And Freak says to Spawn, are you going to take me to jail because I killed that guy? I don't care anymore. I like Spawn's answer. He says, I'm not your conscience. You did what you had to do.
Yeah, I'm fighting a few inner demons myself. You reminded me to stay focused. I guess he does learn something from the Freak.
It's the wrong lesson, though. And that'll become important in the next issue with Cagliostro. Some of what Cagliostro says. Trying to warn him that he's on the wrong mission. But that's where the story ends. Spawn says he's now more focused. The Freak says, I'm focused on my next target already.
With a gun pointed at Spawn's back.
Yeah, and Spawn says, well, good luck. Hope you succeed. And Freak says, I will. I do really love that last panel with the blood dripping down his
Yeah,
face.
it's cool. And his eyes
It's
are
a great
red
panel.
suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
But that's where we'll leave the Freak for some time. I think it's almost as many issues. I think it's almost double this issues, like another 37 issues.
We'll see him again in
something.
issue 70, and then we'll see him again in issue 100.
Yeah, so almost another 32 issues, or 33 issues, rather. So it's going to take a long time to get back to what that target means. And now we're going to need a Spawn number 38.
All right, I'm gonna read those credits. I'm gonna make one quick note here. It's something in the back matter of 37, but it is that Tony Daniel will be taking over pencils. Like, first of all, Spawn is going to become bi-weekly. So this era of Spawn is coming out every 2 weeks until issue 50, which is nuts.
I mean, that's 12 issues.
For a book that is
or 13.
Almost monthly.
Yeah.
But Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad are going to be the other art team, aside from Greg and Todd.
And it's interesting. You wonder, was he racing towards 50 for a specific reason? Like, do we need to hit that at a specific time frame, in time for the movie, in time for something like that? Well, the movie's further down the road, I think.
So 38 comes out in December of 95, right? Or that's the date on it. So what, it probably came out a month before, right? The way that these things tend to work. It's coming out late 1995. The movie's got to be in production. It's already been talked about. It's got to be in production in 96, and it comes out summer 97.
So summer 96 would be Spawn 50, and that would put Spawn 50 up against Onslaught and all that stuff, and Heroes Reborn just about. So I wonder if that's why Todd's like, I got to be in this big year. Because 1996 was a huge year for comics.
Yeah, and we really do know that the timeline on some of this stuff, it gets planned 6-8 months out in advance, sometimes. So, we'll add it to the list of stuff we'll ask Todd one day.
Oh, you know what happened?
What?
In February to May 1996.
Shoot.
DC versus Marvel.
Well, yeah.
So he was trying to recoup those dollars that were being taken by the big event book.
Well, and also because he knows, smartly, issue 41 of a book doesn't sell as well as issue 51 of DC vs. Marvel, issue 2 of DC vs. Marvel, issue 3 of DC vs. Marvel. Right. But issue 50 is a milestone. I think also, in a way, he does want to be the first Image comic to get there.
Yeah.
We know he loves a milestone. So,
yeah.
Which also is a kind of a sports thing. Weirdly.
True.
So,
true.
Anyway, we're going to move on to Spawn number 38. This is Mind Games. Story by Todd McFarlane and Julia Simmons. Pencils by Tony Daniel. Inks by Kevin Conrad. Letters by Tom Warzakowski. We also get a different coloring team here. It's going to be Todd Broker with computer color assist by Roy Young. Dedicated to Marv Wolfman.
All right. Marv Wolfman.
Another legend. I'm not going to read the summary because we just went through it.
You just read that.
And
issue.
It was literally.
And if we prove that we can do it in 30 seconds, then the entire 40 or whatever minutes we just spent would have been.
Yeah. I mean, the last line of the summary, though, is unknowingly Spawn finds himself an accomplice to an innocent man's murder. So
there's a little bit of confirmation of exactly what actually happened, regardless of what the Spawn or even the Freak thinks.
Right. So this issue starts one of the weirdest heads I've ever seen.
The guy's weird face with the pipe in it, and the cartoon of him like leaning forward with his finger out. They look very like Far Side to me or something.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird, and I don't know what book the guard is reading. We're opening on a security guard reading a book, sitting in a security post at the outside of a mansion.
Yeah, as like a car pulls up, and there's a lot of business here of I need your ID, there's no visitors, that kind of thing. And the man that gets out of the car to show his identification, ends up sort of like attacking the man, the guard.
Yeah, he attacks the guard.
So he can get in.
The guy's like, I've got an appointment. The guard's like, I don't have any appointment. Let me see your ID. The guy's ID is expired. And while the guard is like looking at it, he kind of ambushes him and snaps his neck. And I don't know what book he's supposed to be reading, but you can clearly read like several pages of text in it on these pages.
Yeah,
which is funny to me.
We've invoked this before, that there's been sort of like an EC Comics riff every once in a while with Spawn.
Yeah.
This is another one that I think kind of feels like that.
Yeah, a little bit. This is kind of a very cliche sort of opening for a story where like the guard is getting killed on the way in. And he makes his way to the mansion. This guy named, what is his name? Chris?
Sure.
Yeah, it's Chris. Chris finds himself unusually apprehensive. He's creeping around in this big, dusty mansion full of cobwebs. We see some experimental equipment kind of laying around. And he makes his way to a rack of videotapes, and he's looking for a specific video. He turns on the VCR and starts watching. And as he starts watching, we cut to Spawn's alley. Here in Spawn's alley, he's digging through the trash for his stash of big guns,
which he excitedly finds.
Yes.
I don't know how he couldn't find them before, because they are bigger than his body. How do you feel about Tony Daniel here? It's
the B team right now. No offense to him. But it's also like early on in his tenure, even if he's doing just a few issues here, he certainly doesn't have deft charm that Greg Capullo brings to everything. But it's serviceable, and there are things I like about it.
It's a lot simpler, I think. It takes less chances in terms of like panel layouts, in terms of sort of even storytelling beats in a weird way. A lot more square and rectangular panels that are just going to get you through the stuff that you need to know.
We talked about that panel with the weird broken baby doll head in the sewer in the previous issue.
Yeah.
Tony Daniel wouldn't put that in the foreground.
Tony Daniel tends to not put anything in the foreground, though. It's just mid-ground.
Well, I just mean he wouldn't do anything that clever or that just like side interest, like this is just a weird visual thing I'm going to spend the time to draw. And that's not necessarily a knock on him.
No.
It's just a little more straightforward. And again, Capullo has been coming into his own over the course of his tenure on Spawn so far. He also has grown as an artist in that time, and grown as a Spawn artist in particular.
Do you think the big help is that he has Todd inking him, and so Todd gets to sort of veer things in a certain way? And
I think it may be that. I think it may be partially just a certain eye for detail that Capullo has, a certain way of drawing people that Capullo has.
Sure.
That, we can compare to that weird face by Tony Daniel on the first page, which I actually like.
I like it. I mean, it's fine. It's just weird.
It is. And it seems like he is reaching harder to find those kind of things in his art.
It's very interesting that Tony Daniel and Greg would end up in that New 52 relaunch at the same time, both doing Batman books.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It is interesting.
It's kind of crazy that would happen. I mean, it's not.
Tony Daniel
totally
was there
crazy,
for a while before on Batman,
sure.
Batman RIP and all that stuff. But yeah, they did wind up, and maybe it's because someone thought back to the time when they were doing Spawn at the same time.
The guns and stuff here, though, this is kind of what I was talking about with nondescript technology shit. These just look like 90s guns.
This just looks like a pile of stuff.
They don't look cool. They just look like they
don't look cool. Like
they just look.
Sci-fi guns are hit and miss to begin with. Yeah, these just look like they're just big piles of tubes and squares.
Yeah.
And again, there are parts of that I still find myself channeling in my own art. There are things about that I like. But, like, it just says they didn't want to look up real guns.
Sure. That's fine.
Which, mixed bag there. You know, it's fantasy. It's sci-fi. They have a little bit of that space for that. But at the same time, they do just kind of look like a pile of junk.
I do like Spawn polishing the guns with his cape. That's kind of fun. I like the panel.
In the Nicki Minaj pose, like all squatted down like that.
He is sitting in his throne, to be fair.
Is he in that one?
The throne's right behind him.
I guess he is. It's just hard to tell because of the way that it's
he is
drawn.
Maybe also thrown
his
it back,
cape.
But, you know.
The depth is a little bit funky there. Tony Daniel clearly wasn't looking at a model or a reference shot of someone sitting in a chair from the front there.
Cagliostro shows up. He's got a lot of bullets, but he's also now warning Spawn that he's chasing a red herring, which is...
Spawn's gearing up to go kill Jason Wynn, is what he's doing specifically. Finally, he's like, you know what? The freak inspired me to go do my damn thing. I'm going to get Jason Wynn. I'm going to finally kill him. I finally found all my big guns that I've been looking for all this time. And Cagliostro's like, well, now, Spawn, I must say, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Hey, listen, I'm the Cagliostro voice.
That's why I didn't attempt to do yours.
Yeah, and then we just cut to not scene. So we cut back to the mansion, but we're cutting back to the videotape specifically. And we're cutting back to this man who's the greatest facial hair of all time. This is Frederick Wilhelm, who was born in Geneva, Switzerland. And he was a poverty-stricken boy who dreamed of becoming a doctor. When war engulfed Europe, he was a frontline medic, and he trained as a physician. And he met a nurse who he fell in love with, and...
She's drawn very, like, hello, nurse here. Like, I like this drawing. I mean, it's a very sexy drawing, of course. It's meant to be, because you're supposed to be like, oh, that's his dream babe. And so, yeah, she gets the love of his life.
It's kind of sick. Heart of Ice.
Yes, it's very Heart of Ice.
Almost exactly, and that kind of makes sense. Because Heart of Ice would have been 93 when it won the Emmy, or 94.
Yeah.
So it
had
already come out.
And that was the introduction of that story for Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, hadn't existed in comics.
Yes, exactly. It's been adapted into comics in a couple of different ways at this point. Yeah, so the love of his life gets sick. He meets her during the war when he's trained to be a doctor on the front lines. He began harvesting blood for her transfusions. And ultimately, she got too sick. She is so sick that he volunteers for a project. Sorry, I think
he basically signs up to work for the U.S. Army because they need doctors and scientists, I guess. Even though he's just a doctor to this point, it's not really super clear why he would be involved. But I guess whatever his field of medicine is would help with their cybernetic simian project.
You know what it is? Okay, sorry. Here we go. He's studying neurology because she has a neurological condition. He's become like a leading expert on neurology. And so he's doing all these weird experiments with her to save her life. But because of his neurological research, the government comes to him for, yes, as you said, the cybernetic simian project, because he's an expert neurologist. And he accepts, and even though it jeopardizes the recovery of his beloved Anna, he ends working on a cyborg gorilla, codenamed Cygor.
Not really much of a code name, but
no, but it is awesome. It rules. Cygor is kick-ass.
At this point, Cygor was already a toy.
Yes, and so we are now learning a little bit of the origins of Cygor. That's really the downfall, though, is because all we're learning is the origins of Cygor. We barely even see Cygor on the page.
The other thing too, and I don't want to I don't like to be like, this is how they should have written it. The best version of Cygor is that he actually puts her brain in Cygor. That's the best version of it.
So that's the twist here with him, is that as he learns that they're building this cyborg gorilla super soldier, he starts doing this work to put a man's mind into a gorilla's body. And he realizes that the most practical way to do that is to train the gorilla to be human over time and to transfer the human mind little by little.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unclear if he means like psychologically, like transfer her brain or whatever. Later we see her brain in a jar, basically, her dead body and her brain in a jar. But he decides that he's going to continue the research himself to find a way to put her brain in a new body, to let her live on. And we see this like sort of Frankenstein-ish panel here where he's got like cyborg orangutans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cyborg horse.
A cyborg
And he's like
cat.
kind of cat. That's what it is. It looks like a horse because no, I'm sorry. It looks like a horse because of the tube coming out of its face.
Yeah, 100%.
In the slightly smaller reprint size, the art is a little bit more muddled around the end of its face, so it looks like a horse.
I'll
with
actually
a weird
throw that
muzzle.
at the colors.
It is also a little very kind of gray on this page.
A lot of gray on all these pages.
So,
and it makes it a little rough to sort of understand entirely what's going on if you're not really poring over them.
But we learn that Dr. Wilhelm has had a stroke and that he is laying helpless in the basement, or it was at one point laying helpless in the basement, waiting for Cygor to escape. Basically wishing that someone was there to help save his beloved Anna, because it seems like she's finally about to die.
The timing also on this is pretty unclear. We don't know that, like, I think it becomes
how long it's been.
It becomes a little bit more clear by the end that, like, Chris is showing up maybe a few weeks after this all happens.
Right. And at the beginning, he's looking at like 1975, 1981, 1986. Those are the years on the tapes he's looking at.
But that's not the year on the tape of the one that he's watching. So that one is maybe more recent. So like we could assume that maybe that one is like 1994, 1990, or like 1995. We do.
So we cut back to the alley.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
I was going to say we cut back to the alley.
Cut back to the alley. Cut back to the alley now.
Where Cagliostro is not being fucking helpful at all. No, he's just being he's like, saying, I don't know.
You think you have the answers finally, but those aren't the right answers.
Maybe
Spawn's been like searching for answers, and every time fucking Cagliostro shows up, he's like, you think you want the answers, but they're right in front of you. Spawn finally pieces all the shit together, and now he's like, that's not the right answer.
Yeah, Spawn is basically like, listen, Wynn hired Chapel. Chapel killed me. Wynn basically killed me. I gotta kill Wynn. What else is there? Cagliostro's like,
a lot.
Maybe more.
Yeah.
But you're not asking the right questions. And he's like, motherfucker, I've been asking questions since issue 1. And you don't answer any of them.
You just show up and tell me to ask more, that I have the answers.
Or to make sweet berry wine.
Super wine. Now Spawn's back on his throne. He's kind of squatting on the throne. It is a very low throne here, the way it's drawn.
Alone.
Every time he draws him from the front, he's like kind of very like chaise loungy. He's polishing his gun on his throne. And these two people, maybe they're night people, maybe they're like tourists.
I think they're I think they are friends based on Spawn's reaction later, where he's like, oh no, I didn't mean to scare you, kind of.
They walk in and he's polishing his gun, and they see him pointing the gun, and they're like, oh God. And they beg for their lives and run off. And he's like, wait, guys, never mind. So
love the next page. Love the cape.
Tony Daniel kills the cape here.
So cool.
It's great. Just
so tattered
fabric,
but huge still.
Cool. Yeah, exactly.
And also Cagliostro's hair is insane.
The framing of the page here with like the word balloons works really nice with the art. So big ups to everybody right there, you know. It works.
This is a very effective issue art-wise. I don't want it to sound like we were too down on Tony Daniel. I think
it's just a little more straightforward.
Yeah, overall.
And there are bits of great cartooning. The thing is, I think he's trying to match some of Greg Capullo's energy. And he's drawing these two characters in a very distinct way. Like the guy kind of has a beanie coming down over his eyes. Like, what is it, Donald from
Fat Albert?
Fat Albert. Yeah, exactly. And they look like they're meant to be characters that we're going to see again at some point. Like, they're just very distinct.
You know that
and
you'll
I
never
think
see them again because they don't get names.
That's right.
That's the Chris Claremont rule. Well, actually, if they get names, they would die. So, good point.
Yeah. So, basically, Cagliostro keeps telling, Spawn, trust me, Jason wins a small piece of a bigger puzzle, and you're a puppet, Al. At least you were. It's time you started thinking like a free man. And Al's like, I've been trying.
The free man thing also is almost a slight reference to the freak thing too, right? That he kind of says something to that effect too. Like, oh, I've been freed. I've been, you know.
Mm-hmm. He says, like, I was set free by this or whatever, Now Chris is digging into the basement back at the mansion. Operative Chris swings open the door to see, and here's where we see Anna's half-decomposed body sitting idly by while precious fluids flow to her brain. And it's clear that it's become a very gruesome experiment, whatever's going on. Her brain's outside of her body. It's connected still somehow. It's unclear exactly what he's doing. But like you said, it seems like the natural progression is that he wants to put her brain in the cyborg's body.
Yeah.
In the Cygor body. But we don't ever see that happen. Instead, what we see is Chris run through the laboratory and smack dab into Cygor, who's all chained up to the wall.
Right, because Wilhelm in his tapes has said, like, oh, it hasn't eaten in weeks, and it's loose.
Yeah. But it's unclear if it's loose here. If these,
I think it is. I think it has broken out of its chains. It's just still got its chains on it.
It's because of the way, again, man, some of this art is a little unclear. The chains look like they're chained up to something, and they are. They're chained to the shoulder pads that he's wearing. Yeah. So, like, he's chained to himself, but not to the wall.
Right.
Honestly, not a great drawing of Cygor. I like the teeth and the face.
I think it's kind of boring because, like, we don't even really get to see him.
Yeah, it's like he didn't get to know what Cygor looked like before he drew it.
Even though there's already a toy of Cygor.
Could have looked at the toy. So, as Chris meets his presumable fate with Cygor, who it says is getting fresh meat for the first time in 3 weeks, we cut back to Spawn, who is visiting Granny Lake again. And he's seeking counsel because the last time he saw Wanda, he scared the shit out of her. He went to her house, tried to confront her about the fact that he saw Terry working with Jason Wynn, thinks that Terry is a traitor to him, thinks that Terry stole Wanda from him. And he lays that out to Cagliostro earlier. And that's some of what Cagliostro is telling him he's misguided about. He's right about Jason Wynn as far as we know here. And that's the other thing that we didn't get into with Cagliostro that we actually need to talk about real quick.
Sure.
It's an important part of Spawn's backstory as Al Simmons. We learned that Al Simmons, before he was Spawn, became world-famous government assassin Al Simmons because he saved the president's life from an assassination attempt. And that brought him into the arms of Jason Wynn. Cagliostro tells him, or implies basically, that the reason they made him a secret agent after he saved the president is because the CIA were the ones who were trying to kill the president themselves.
Right, so they needed to keep him in the inner circle because he became the celebrity. I think it's an interesting twist to it all, but I also don't trust Todd to execute on it correctly, if that makes sense.
We're just a couple years out from JFK, the movie here at Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
So, at an early peak of, the CIA killed JFK conspiracy stuff. So the other thing is,
JFK is coming back, so
that's true. The other thing is, though, we don't know exactly which president he saved. So is it canonically that he saved Reagan from Hinckley?
based on the fact that he was at the Republican National Convention, yeah. Right? What year is Hinckley?
That was 1981.
Yeah.
That Hinckley tried to
So
shoot
it has
Reagan.
to be that.
So are we? Oh my God!
Should we get
music superstar John?
Should we get John Hinckley on this show?
I actually like people who close deals.
I have an email to send. John Hinckley, what was it like getting your assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan thwarted by Spawn, of all people?
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
That is,
and of course, that would be right in
canonical.
At this point, we can assume it sort of unspoken is.
Yeah.
I don't know who actually. I actually don't know what stopped Ronald Reagan's death. If John Hinckley just. I don't know what secret agents were there. Yeah, I don't know. I know this. He didn't finish the job. That's all I know.
Time.
Yeah, it only took another like 40 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Or 30 years, I think. Something. Anyway, doesn't matter. Ronald Reagan's dead. Ronald Reagan died during Pride Month.
Thank God.
And it's Pride Month right now when we're recording this.
Actually, though, Hinckley did hit him with a bullet.
He did hit him, yeah. He did.
Reagan was wounded when one of the bullets ricocheted off of the limousine. I think he's just a bad shot.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it comes down to.
Jodie Foster should have told someone better to do it. She should have enlisted Al Simmons.
Anyway, shout out to Ronald Reagan for
dying.
Well, introducing one of the first gender neutral bathrooms. It's great. Anyway.
In Minecraft. Anyway.
I have so many things to edit out of this.
Thing that we needed. Yeah.
No, not the Ronald Reagan hate, just us like riffing on jokes that aren't funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
John Hinckley, get on the show.
Yeah, John Hinckley come on the podcast. Honestly, he probably would. He was supposed to come to my town and play at a bar, and they were like, due to the fact that we realized this is the John Hinckley that almost killed Ronald Reagan, we had to shut down the show.
He does art and stuff. I wonder what his Spawn looks like.
He makes music.
Yeah, and he makes music still.
I'm
going to try to get John Hinckley on the show.
See if we can get John Hinckley. That would really be something.
Be the funniest thing ever.
Just start interviewing him about Spawn. Anyway.
No, it was going to be a random Spawn arc that we're up to at that point. So he's going to have to read it and then talk to us about it.
Send him the issues. We'll see if we can get him for one of the mini-series. Spawn Commando.
And Super Patriot.
Okay. So we had to address the fact that he saved Ronald Reagan's life. And that's why he was at the RNC. That's why he was world famous. And that's why he was brought into the CIA and eventually killed.
It is very stupid that it's taking us 40 issues, though, to find out that his whole celebrity status that hasn't really played into anything.
Kinda something about it.
Like, is like a part of the work.
It's also amazing, like 38 issues in, that we can still be learning new twists about this one stupid fucking thing. And like, it seems like just a way to keep it going, like the yes and that never ends. Like, you're about to beat you're the person who betrayed you, Spawn. And then Spawn is like, yes, and there's more I have to do about it.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going. And on some level, I get it, because things like this, they're not simple, and you want to keep the core story and the core mythos going. Especially Todd McFarlane, we know for a fact this is the part of Spawn that he finds particularly compelling, not necessarily the like supernatural hell Spawn stuff. That's why Spawn's not fighting a lot of like demons and exorcising ghosts and all that kind of shit. So, on that note, though, Spawn has kind of been haunting Granny Blake, and he comes back to visit
She's
her.
like pretty cool with it though, which I like.
She's blind, so she doesn't see that he's all like hamburgered up. He doesn't even try to hide his chains or stuff anymore around her. So she doesn't get quite the vibe from him that some people do because of that visual terror.
Right.
She thinks of him as an angel, and he has told her before, you know, an angel told me that you were going to heaven, and you still are.
Yeah.
And this is kind of an
That
interesting
didn't
bit
happen, though.
because I think maybe he's,
I think he's just saying nice things to her.
Is that an angel? That's not an Angela, is it?
It's not.
No, I didn't think so.
The angels to this point also are assholes.
Yeah, except for God.
God was nice.
Not an angel necessarily. So, but also he said that to her before, like there is a hell and there is a heaven, and you are going to heaven, Granny.
I think
like
he just thinks that
before.
because he has a very low self-confidence. Honestly, self-esteem is low for Al Simmons.
Well, he did go to hell himself, so like, you know, I think he's putting her on a pedestal above himself.
Right.
But she tells him all about how a demon came to visit Wanda and scared her. She tried to tell Wanda it was probably Al. And she says she loves you, Al, and nothing is ever going to change that about her. Nothing's ever going to change her opinion of you.
Yeah.
And she tells him, or she asks him, will you protect her from these demons? And he says, I'm going to try. Yeah.
I like that.
It's nice. I always like Granny Blake. She's always nice. And it ends with her saying, I want to show you a picture of Wanda's little girl.
It's a funny way to end, but I also thought that I was missing a page.
You know, honestly, the ending here, it's not rendered as striking as it could be. Because what we see is the silhouette of Spawn slumped forward in the chair,
with like his head
holding his head in his hands, feeling the sorrow, and she's saying, like, now let me remind you again of everything that hell has cost
The way that it should have ended is head in his hands. I'm trying. Out.
Right.
We're out.
It's just a little bit of storytelling that doesn't quite land.
And then like a little thing in the corner, it's like, next time on Spawn. So
yeah, anyway, it's not a bad ending. It's another emotional beat. That's kind of where we're at for the endings that Todd McFarlane is writing in a lot of these cases, is Spawn winding up in these emotional conundrums. Now that issue, I didn't hate it, but it felt like half an issue of two comics. Like it felt like the start of two different stories.
Which feels like what you would do with two different creative teams, right? Oh, hey, you guys are going to do this arc. You guys are going to do this arc. They're kind of going to be running concurrent. Or maybe they're not, and just whatever, we're going to put them out.
But in this arc, it feels, in this issue anyway, it feels a little draggy as a result. It feels a little decompressed, because normally we'd have at least like Spawn fight Cygor at some point.
Spawn does nothing in this issue except polish guns.
Hell yeah, he does.
And talk to Cagliostro, scare two random people, and
plan to kill the head of the CIA. He's basically living like a prepper.
But he's been doing that for fucking 30 issues at this point. And then
exactly,
like as soon as he realized it was Jason Wynn, like he's been trying to plan for that. And then also talking to Granny Blake, which is fine.
It feels like if there was an issue or an episode of the X-Files where like there wasn't really an alien and there wasn't really a monster of the week, but they did kind of talk about a lot of the important stuff, but like they didn't really do anything new, and Mulder and Scully didn't investigate anything.
It's a moving the chains issue, which is not a Spawn pun, but could be. I mean, it's a football pun, but or a football reference, right? But like, yeah, it's just kind of like getting us to where we need to go. A little ironic because the next issue has nothing to do with these issues at all. It's just the Christmas issue.
Right.
But
so coming next episode, the Spawnography Summer Christmas Special Spectacular.
That's true. But let's dig into the back matter real quick. There's not a lot. In 37, so a very funny thing is that Terry Fitzgerald keeps getting his blah, blah, blah column. And he mostly ends up talking about hockey. So I can weirdly get updated on hockey from 30 years ago through the blah blah blah.
That's fun. I have no idea what it's like to go on a non sequitur about something other than Spawn in a thing related to talking about Spawn.
He mostly like, so apparently people keep sending them shit like to the TMP.
People love to send famous
like
people
TMP
shit, man.
offices. They keep getting like fan art and items and stuff. And so he's like,
you get to be a certain level, you just get shit in the mail all the time.
He's like, if you send me a self-addressed, self-stamped envelope, I will just send you the shit that is in my office because everybody's getting mad at me for having a messy desk.
Someone has Todd McFarlane's stapler in their collection right now.
And it even says like I will take the coolest suggestions from both and print their names here, and each person gets a Toddy autograph Spawn for another thing. Like, he's just like, I need to get rid of things, and if you have good ideas for like what we could sign or whatever, I'll take the best ideas and I'll sign that and send it to you.
As we learned from Lan, he's kind of apparently prone to do stuff like that.
Sounds great. So in issue 37, that's when we learn from Todd, starting with this issue, and at least for the foreseeable future, Spawn will be coming at you bi-weekly. I will be writing the stories, but we'll have a rotating art team of Greg Capullo and myself doing the odd issues, and Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad, whose work you saw in the Spawn Blood Feud miniseries, doing the even issues. If all goes according to plan, this should remain consistent up until about issue 50. Please give me your thoughts on our new frequency, as I'm interested to hear what you think. Also, Tony Daniel will be in the Chicago area, blah, 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 blah.
Spawn coming out as bi.
It's Pride Month.
Pride Month.
And then there's some fucking letters that are whatever. They're like by teenagers who don't read it. No, who haven't read a book. Like, that's really what it comes down to. They're like,
I don't read either.
Why is this happening? And he's like, I don't know, because the story's got to move forward. And there's a lot of like toy discourse in the letters.
Oh, hell yeah.
Where this woman, Michelle Ortiz, is like,
okay, put her on blast.
No. She's like, she's putting all of the guys who are complaining that all the stores are upcharging for figures, she's putting them on blast. She's like, you're complaining about prices? I'm at the store. I'm buying the figures. I got the figures. You don't have them.
That's alpha. These other guys are cucked.
Basically.
By Michelle Ortiz.
So, but then there's one that says, I do ask you one thing. Why do you constantly have Entertainment Television reporting murders in New York City and stuff like that? I never ever see things like that on E, and I watched it one day just to be sure I wasn't missing something. This has always bugged the crap out of me. Tony Culpepper.
Science.
Tony Culpepper,
Taking it in your own
19,
hands.
Alabama. Todd writes, Tony, there's actually an answer for almost every question I get asked, and this one is easy. The television pages are more of a vehicle to get information across to the audience. But because for the most part they would be fairly wordy, I wanted to get across the information as entertaining a fashion as possible, which is why you have three personalities. One is the confirmed straight, female newscaster, looking mostly at the facts and reporting those. The second is the reporter you speak of, who has a tendency to get into the entertainment side of what the news is.
No, he doesn't. He's usually like, these murderers would...
Although recently, I haven't played that up. The third is the radical reporter, whom, if you've been paying attention, has been with a different station every time he reports. Again, it's my assumption that he's such a radical that he gets fired from every job, picks up a new job, and does it all over again. Sort of the Rush Limbaugh of comic books.
Disgusting. Rotten hell, Rush.
That sucks, but also it confirms our suspicions.
I get what he's saying.
Yeah.
No, that's not anything about it. But yes, that is exactly how we were reading that. So good work on that one, Todd.
So that's issue 37.
Nailed it.
And then issue 38, it does, again, this is great radio, but this is the photo of the Todd McFarlane Productions Halloween.
That's
oh, yeah,
fun.
look at that. Great radio.
Yes, this is great radio.
There's nothing crazy here except that people are like, can helicopters blow up a building? And he's like, I don't know, probably. So, like, these are the concerns of the letters column at this era are like,
on September 11th, 2001, Black Hawk helicopters descended. I don't know what that was. Sorry, another broadcast clipped in for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't. Again, New York's never had problems with buildings, so weird that you would assume they did.
Yeah.
And also people are like, hey, how come your book is so sad? Why does bad stuff happen to Al all the time? And here's what Todd has to say to that.
Because he's a little piece of shit.
He says, one of the things I've been trying to establish is all the crap that has been dumped on our poor hero, Al Simmons, and how he must learn to deal with all the adversity and overcome these hardships to become a true hero. We're near the point now where I'll be taking the focus away from Jason Wynn, per se, and having Spawn get closer to his relationship to the bums. More specifically, to bring some sort of resolution to his relationship with Wanda by issue 50. I was trying to show that once Al does overcome all of his problems, it will be far more impressive based upon the hurdles he has had to jump over. I apologize. I've been moving a little too slow.
Wow. Well, God bless. Maybe having it come out more often will mean that there's more room to get into some of that stuff, more room for him to play out some of those questions and answers and misdirections. So we'll see as we move forward.
Yeah. Well, George, we got through 2 more. Final thoughts?
That's true. We didn't necessarily touch on it, but these are 2 issues about sort of mad scientists in a way. One who is actually a mad scientist and one who's not. And I think that dichotomy is interesting. I think Spawn gearing up to go take down Jason Wynn because he was inspired by the Freak and his supposed quest is very interesting. But I think that not having the payoff to any of that and just having that second issue really feeling like setup across the board is a bit of a hindrance.
Yeah, I liked the Freak issue more. The Cygor one I wanted more from.
It's tough when one of those is Greg Capullo and Alan Moore and the other one is not. It's always going to be an uphill battle for the second act on that bill.
Of course. And I think actually like Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad acquit themselves very well.
Oh, they're fine. It's not even that they're bad. It's not that at all. I don't want to, again, no aspersions to Tony Daniel. There are things we liked in that issue, of course. It's just following the act of Greg Capullo and Alan Moore. That's a tough act to follow.
Right. I think Alan Moore helps elevate the Freak a little bit. And even though that arc or that issue is a little whatever, having Greg and Todd on the art gets you there. Like, you're like, all right, this is all working in conjunction with each other. We're here for it.
It's a little one and done, like, Freak of the Week tale, to be honest. And it works. And it works because of the level of craft. The second issue is a lot of setup and it's a lot of spinning wheels, and the craft is very serviceable. In times it's very charming, but it doesn't match an issue that's basically just a fun standalone.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another 2 issues. George, where can people find you if you want them to find you?
You can find me at Crypt Trash on Instagram. For now, I guess. I know they're doing some AI training thing, which I'm not a fan of. Call AI. I'm Magnus Robot Fighter. You can find me on there for now anyway at Crypt Trash. You can find me on Blue Sky at Crypt Trash. Listen to my music. My band is Hypersleep. We are on Spotify and on Bandcamp and all that. And then I also make music find it on YouTube at Witch Crisis. And you can read my writing every blood-soaked day at Newsarama.
Cool. Yeah, you can find me on the internet at PElightning or at lapsed.punk. My band broke up, so I don't have a band anymore.
I hate that.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm at peace with it.
Okay.
But you can listen to my old bands, Power Trash, Cutters, Go Small. They're on the internet if you want to. And if you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever that one is. Wherever you listen to podcasts, please rate, review, subscribe. YouTube, we're on there too. It helps the show. I know that folks have been doing it, so I really appreciate it. I will say we are planning a giveaway. Probably do a giveaway for episode 25 because that's our first little milestone is to do 25 episodes. George and I have never gotten to 25 before, so it'll be fun to do. I'll spoil it a little bit, but we got a slabbed copy of Spawn number 16. So
issue we both enjoyed quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Big fans, Grant and Greg. Mm-hmm. So, and
you can go back and listen to that. We've already covered that issue on the show. So go back and check that out. It's a great episode. I had a lot of fun with it.
It's only 9.4, so sorry, collectors, but it's something. But we'll have stickers and stuff too. And
it's only almost perfect condition.
But Spawnography. We're at Spawnography on Instagram. We will stay on that. We don't have a Facebook because we're not 100. We are on Twitter and Blue Sky at Spawnography Pod or whatever. And we'll see you out there.
Yeah, well, you know what we say, Pierce. For Todd still loved the world.
He gave his only begotten Spawn. Later, Hellspawn.
Spawn!